Welcome to Beyond the Bridge, a Star Trek Multiverse podcast with your hosts, Adam and Carlos.
Welcome to the first episode of Star Trek Discussions. I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, Carlos. Carlos, how's it going?
I'm good, buddy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and it's exciting to venture into the Star Trek universe with you. We're usually talking about Batman, Superman, or Marvel when we get together, but now we're venturing off into a different space, literally and figuratively. But I on this network we had a previous iteration of a Star Trek show that I enjoyed talking Trek, so I thought I'd revive it, and I wanted to bring on somebody that I had podcasted with before, and had a good time talking with, and a fellow Canadian, because all my other co-hosts are American. So I'm like, let me find a Canadian to come and sit on with me and talk. Nothing against Americans. I love my American co-hosts. I'm just saying it's nice to talk with a fellow Canadian and a fellow hockey fan, although we like different teams, but both of them stink right now, so it is what it is.
We're not rivals. Yeah,
exactly. So it's fun to do, Carlos. It'd be nice to do this on a semi-regular basis and go through all the cool stuff that is Star Trek related that we have coming to us, and there is a lot of it currently in the works and upcoming and on the horizon. As far as I know, the next season of
Strange New Worlds.
Strange New Worlds is June 15th, I believe. Yeah. So we're a month. We're slightly less than a month away from now. And there was an announcement about a month and a half ago of Starfleet Academy, which is going to be another show set in the Star Trek universe. Which that's been a show that's been talked about for years, ever since the first season of Discovery, and so that's finally coming to fruition, which I think will be cool. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be more like I guess it's trying to go for the teenage or get the younger audience in it.
So it'll be like Tilly, I think, is going to be like one of the leads in it, and she'll be one of the primary instructors, I guess.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Kind of shepherding that on.
If they carry that over, and who knows who you could have a lot of guest stars for instructors, which is kind of neat, that aspect of it, right?
Totally. Well, and they kind of had a bit of proof of concept with a couple episodes in that last season of Discovery, right? With her shepherding those cadets and showing the kind of things that they could do with an academy type show.
Yeah.
Be it with them out in the field or just within the school. So
yeah,
it sounds like a good idea for sure, and something different in the Star Trek space too, where you can kind of have them in one location, which we haven't had since Deep Space Nine, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So it presents an interesting premise, and you can put them in interesting situations and create new characters for people to sort of latch onto and fall in love with, and while also acknowledging the past via the instructors and other things. So it's definitely, I like the fact that Star Trek, and especially Star Trek on Paramount Plus, continues to branch out and try and reach new areas of the fandom that are potentially untapped. Like they have 2 animated series currently that are going on. They've got Star Trek Lower Decks, which is more adult oriented, and then Star Trek Prodigy, which is more garnered for younger kids. Mm-hmm. But it's good because I think for any franchise or IP to sustain itself, you need to bring in new fans. And that is, I think, specifically true of both Star Trek that we're talking about today and Star Wars, right? Like, if it's just the same core group, the core group is going to get older, and then eventually, life happens. And so you have to, for IP to sustain itself, you have to continually grow the fan base. It's why things like DC and Marvel, those kind of characters, have gone on 80 plus years, because you're sustaining new people are coming in through cartoons, through live action shows, through comics or whatever. So you have to continue to do the same thing for Trek.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Trek kind of was in a weird spot where they weren't doing that, and you were kind of relying on an older fan base that was pretty rigid in what they liked, right? So, but you look at something like DC, and I'd argue that the current generation of fans, many of them never really picked up the comic books in a substantial way, but a lot of them found it via the Justice League animated series and Batman the animated series, and then the Arkham games, right? So, yeah, it's cool to see that Trek is kind of really embracing doing some different styles of storytelling with the cartoons, and a lot of the mobile games and whatnot seem to have some popularity. They keep bringing them out, so I'm assuming people are putting money into.
If they keep bringing it out,
yeah.
No, it's so. Before we talk about overview of Picard, which recently wrapped its third and final season, I just want to get for the audience to get to know you better in terms of a Trek sensibility. Where is your fandom at? Like, so what was your introduction to Trek? What is your favorite Trek series? Who's your favorite captain? Things of that, just go through some things of that nature.
Yeah, to be honest, like the reason that I was intrigued and decided to say yes to joining this podcast, because I find that with the Trek space, you never get people in that casual fandom space ever kind of throwing their thoughts around about it, and I am firmly rooted in that. So I will never be the guy to be able to describe all the different variations of the different iterations of the Enterprise and this Federation code and directive versus another one, and how whatever show
why the
abided by that.
Different.
Yeah. So that's not where I'm coming from. I am purely just the casual fan who has absorbed enough of it, but not all of it by any means. But like you said, we're Canadian, and for a lot of years during the 80s, there wasn't a lot on Canadian TV. So my first introduction to Trek was the original series, just on like daytime reruns and stuff like that. So yeah, it was one of those that was on and around, and my parents being immigrants, like they were familiar with it from syndication back in the old country there. So they it was something that was on in our house, and we were allowed to watch or whatever. So that was that. But the first big kind of Trek thing that I remember and that I watched with some regularity was Next Generation. So Next Gen came out when I was in school, and I had buddies that were big Star Trek fans that really, really embraced Next Gen coming out, and with the trading cards and everything else, like we've all been there, where your friends kind of get you interested and excited in something, and same thing, right? Like that was one of the few shows that we got up here kind of day and date, and you were able to follow along, and that was a big deal when it came out. So yeah, I followed most of Next Gen when I could catch it, kind of thing, and a bit of Deep Space Nine, and then kind of fell off during the Voyager era. And Enterprise had a weird release up here where it was on at odd times and just never ever caught it and stuff. And then, to be honest, it was like the new movies coming out, like the Chris Pine Star Trek movies, and the trailers kind of captured my kid and deciding to go see them, and she loved it. So we worked our way through those, and then when Discovery came out, she was interested in watching it, and we both really liked Discovery, particularly the first two seasons, and that led us to trying out Strange New Worlds, and that's where like the fandom really kicked in. Like we adore Strange New Worlds. So it's just so good. So yeah, I guess we're all in. We paid for her to get her picture with Captain Pike there. So he'd probably be my favorite, I think, just because he's the most down to
Most
earth
recent, yeah.
and kind of the most akin to myself. I
Yeah.
think like John Luke is. I got a soft spot for him, but he's reminds me a bit too much of my dad sometimes, and that's not always a good thing. And and James T. Kirk. He's a bit too fast and loose for my taste. So I think Captain Pike's a good balance of the two of them. So he'd probably be my favorite, I think, just because he appeals to my sensibilities the most. And then, I gave the animated stuff a legitimate try, but it wasn't for me. But I certainly see what they're doing with it and why it's a great idea for them to employ. So yeah, we tried those ones out. Wasn't for us. We are two of the few that stayed on the Discovery train all the way through.
Yeah, I'm there too. I like it. I think it's fresh. It's interesting, but I think it still respects the core tenets of what Star Trek is. So I'm all for it.
Yeah. No, Disco was cool. Like I really liked it. I think it kind of got a little too high concept.
In certain spots, yeah, I
yeah.
could see that. Yeah.
In the last couple of seasons, and it's just like it's a bridge too far sometimes. Like it lost a lot of its charm for me. But you know what? Even if the seasons kind of start dragging a bit in the middle, like it's always started strong and ended strong. And
it was that's the kind of Smallville effect is what I akin to it. It's like starts really good, then there's some crap in the middle, and then it's really good near the end, right? So it's the same kind of idea. But I'm gonna finish it off. There's one more season left in it, so I'll see it through, and then keep going for Strange New Worlds, and then Starfleet Academy. See what that, and I'm sure there'll be others. I think it's just a matter of I think everybody's taking their cue from the sort of slip up that the MCU has had, where it's let's spread out the content, right?
Yeah.
So eventually, when now that we're having Discovery and they've announced Strange New Worlds, when not Strange New Worlds, sorry, Starfleet Academy. When eventually Strange New Worlds ends, they'll probably be ready with whatever's going to take its place. Yep. And that's the smart way to do it, instead of saying, here's 8 shows all at once. You have fun with it. You know what I mean? 8 new shows. And I like that they're spacing it out, sort of to have one, basically, when one wraps, there's another one on deck. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, well, and to your point, like I do think that Paramount watched and took their cues from where Marvel and Star Wars, which are two infinitely bigger, more popular properties, but where they faltered, Star Trek and Paramount, to their credit, really seemed to learn those lessons. And you look at Picard season 3 and how they're deploying their new shows and everything else. They're not making those same mistakes that Disney made.
Yeah.
So it's exciting times.
And so I'm ready for whatever they have planned that we know about, obviously, and that stuff that we don't know about, we'll find out in due course. But for me, just to sort of refresh, because it's been a while since I've done one of these, in the same boat as you, where the first Trek that I remember is Next Gen, and mainly because my brother watched it, and so it was on, and I remember vividly, he would he'd prepare, like it was the whole thing for himself, where he got some snacks, he sat in front of the TV and watched, and so I'd sit with him. Keep in mind, he's 10 years older than me, so I'd sit with him and benefit from the snacks. That was my I'm like, oh, let me sit here and I'll get some, I know he'll give you some of the snacks and stuff. So that was the original, just impetus of me sitting there watching, just to get some food and stuff. But then we started watching it, and I started liking it, and I got into it. So I would watch with him whenever he would watch. And then Deep Space Nine, during its original run, I didn't really watch. I kind of sort of fell off and did other things. But I did check back in with Enterprise and watched that pretty regularly. I liked it. I know some people, there's kind of like a 50-50 split, but I like Scott Bakula as an actor, namely through, rewatching the old Quantum Leap. But I like him as an actor, so I watched. And the one that played the Vulcan there, what's her name? T'Pol, I think it was, the actress there. She's on the list. Just to point that out, she's for people that don't know about the podcast. You're gonna see me click a pen in a few minutes, and I'll explain it at some point. But yeah, so no, I like the Enterprise, and then, but it was like Star Trek was always, if I caught it, I caught an episode. Back in the day, it wasn't like, oh my god, I got to make sure I'm home at this time. Or it's recording at this time, and it was just, if I caught it, I watched it. But then when the new movies came around, the J.J. Abrams and the Chris Pine stuff, that first one, it's like it got me back, like reinvigorated, and so I went back and sort of tried to do as much of a comprehensive rewatch as I could, going back to the original series. That was after the first movie. Is when I went back and sort of really dived into the original series.
That's amazing.
Because it was dealing with that crew. Because otherwise I had not, like, I knew the original series existed, but it's not like I had watched it before. Like, I knew it was there. I knew about Shatner being Kirk. Like, I knew that. I knew Spock, but it's not like I had ever watched it before this rewatch that I did after the first movie. So that really sort of reinvigorated my fandom. But yeah, Next Gen was the first one. And then my favorite captain, it's a tough call. Picard was the first one I saw, so I'll probably go there just, because he was the first one. But I really like Archer. I think he's the most practical, the most,
Okay.
But I do like what Anson Mount is doing with Pike. I think he's pretty cool. So, but yeah, it's weird because Patrick Stewart is Picard, but he's also Professor X, and for me, it's like whenever I see him first, it's Professor X because of my superhero bias. So it's like watching him as Picard. It's like my two fandoms are like, okay, wait, where's the part of it's like, where's the wheelchair and the mind control things? And then it's like, wait, wrong franchise. It's like, so it's like, and then I saw him in Multiverse of Madness while he was redoing. He was also on Picard. I think it was on break at that time.
Yeah.
And then he got Man of Steel by Wanda, which really pissed me off. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, no. So Picard is like, he's got that double spot in my fandom where he's Professor X and he's also Picard. So it's like he's got that little bit of an edge for that. But while we're calling out, other spots in the fandom, the Anson Mount was a guest star on Smallville back in the day. I can't remember what season, but it was early on.
That's funny. I was reading this morning that I guess he was one of the contenders for the role of Lex for that show.
Yeah, because he was on an episode of the podcast that they do, and they were talking about it. But he's also been linked to Superman as well. Like his name back in the day, not now, obviously, but back in the day, like his name was always. I don't know if it was through fan circles or actually if he legitimately tested for it, but he was, always in the early 2000s linked to like, oh, what about this guy for Superman, right? So he's been there. And then William Shatner, I don't know if you remember this, Carlos, but he played Two-Face in the animated sequel to the Batman 66.
Yeah, he was the first movie. Yeah, which is cool.
Which is really cool, and it was really fun to watch because Adam West has that cadence in his voice that does one thing, and then Shatner has the cadence in his voice that does another thing. So listening to their voices and watching this cartoon, it was like you have to like settle in and get comfy because when they're delivering lines, they both have their own certain, way of doing it, that over exaggerated. So it's like, all right, how long is this exchange of dialogue going to take? But it was cool nonetheless, and I like that they brought Two-Face into that franchise, and that it was Shatner was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was inspired that they took like kind of the other big IP franchisee actor from that era, right, and brought him in to play Two-Face like decades later, to shore that up with that animated series or sequel to the series and stuff like that. So yeah, it was pretty inspired, and I don't know what Canadian doesn't have a soft spot for good old William Shatner.
Exactly. I mean, the only thing that could sort of ruin his reputation for me is if I find that he's a Montreal fan. But it is what it is. Everybody has their cross to bear, so we'll leave it at that. But what I think we should do now is we'll take a quick break, and then on the other side of the break, we'll come back and talk about our thoughts on Picard overall.
What's up, everyone? It's the Emerald Enthusiast. For all of your multiverse viewing and listening needs, check out our shows, which include Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Power Rangers, the Marvel Universe, and the DC Universe, including the Emerald Echo podcast. You can check us out on Podbean, and remember to subscribe right here on YouTube. That's the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network. From the first podcast to the last.
And we're back. And as promised, we're going to talk about Star Trek Picard, mostly season 3, but we'll briefly touch on season 1 and 2. Carlos, when you first heard that they were bringing back Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard for this, what was your reaction?
I thought it was pretty cool. I was surprised that they got him to agree to do a Picard show all these years later. But I was like, I was pretty hyped for it. Like, we had seen some pretty cool Star Trek at that point in time, and all those actors had done some pretty notable works as far as directing things or writing things. So I was excited, and in Calgary at our expo, we had like the first ever reunion of the entire cast of Next Generation. So kind of, I remember the hype and the heat that reunion brought. And if memory serves, like I think that was the one and only time that Denise Crosby was also there. But yeah, don't quote me on that. But it was definitely the first reunion they had. Was here. I guess the appeal of coming to the mountains was enough to get them to all say yes. But yeah, having them talk about that like years before, and then see it come to some form of fruition, or what I thought was coming to fruition with what Picard was going to be, was pretty cool. It ended up being different than I expected for the first 2 seasons. Yeah. But I did enjoy them to a large extent. So I think they had a pretty decent supporting cast, but we got to face facts. Like season 3 was where it's at. That's what I wanted to see.
When you tell somebody you're bringing back Picard, and it's called Picard, like the expectation is, all right, we're going to see the other next gen cast members. Like, you have to, but I will give them credit. In the first 2 seasons, they were kind of trying to do what Discovery is doing, in the sense that let's also give the audience something new, and sort of go in a new direction. But let's let them. Yeah, I think using Patrick Stewart to sort of get certain aspects of the fandom to come on board and experience something different.
Yeah.
But giving them a familiar face to do that with was a smart move.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know, like, if there's any truth to the rumor that I was reading that he was a bit opposed to being on the deck of a starship and wearing a Starfleet uniform.
Yeah, I think that I've heard that too. I've heard him say that as well. Like, he didn't want to. His apprehension is, from what I gather, is more just being outright fan service with no no meaning or no real story behind it. Like just let's get them all in because that's what we expect, right? As fans, we expect them all to be there because you're telling me Picard's back, so obviously, right? But he wanted to be, if they were going to do that, if you were going to convince him on the idea, it had to be something truly meaningful and not just paint by the numbers fan service. So that was his, I think, his real apprehension.
Yeah. And I don't know that it was always planned, but like where we got to was magic. And then that we have those other seasons building into it and building up to it makes it all the better, because now you have one season that is that thing that we all wanted, and you've got two preceding seasons that make it all the stronger and are pretty compelling in their own right. So
and just to, before we we go more into season 3, I think for season 1, I think the interesting thing is this idea that Picard is diagnosed with a terminal disease, right? And then he dies, but through being sort of given, he becomes a synthetic, right? And so within that, we get to see Data's creator, we get, or this and that, and so we get all that. So we still see Brent Spiner, right, in there. I'm pretty sure we saw he went to visit Riker and Troy, right, in that first season. But the idea of giving this hero, this icon of a character, and right off the bat we realize that he's got a terminal illness in the first season. It's like, wait, what's going on here? And I appreciate that they did that, because they took into account all the years that had gone by, his actual real age, and then kind of gave the audience a scenario that everyday people in real life sometimes have to face. Right? So I thought it was smart of them and intriguing, and actually quite ballsy of them to go in that direction in the first season. And then in the second season, that it gets all sort of timey-wimey kind of stuff with time travel and an alternate universe and the Borg, and they start getting a little bit more of what what is our typical tenets of this franchise, right? And I kind of like seeing them have to be off the starship for a good majority of that season, and the idea of having to adhere to the tenets of like regular Earthbound, day to day, like they're in a different time, right? So it's like, okay, we can't mess with the timeline, and so it's like you have that they have to be concerned with, and you get that whole interaction with Picard and the younger version of Whoopi Goldberg's
Guinan.
Yeah, Guinan. That was kind of interesting, and it was kind of fun because I got to give credit to the actress that played it. Obviously she's not Whoopi Goldberg, right? But I thought she did a good job of conveying the essence of that character. And because Picard is so, like, his demeanor and the way Patrick Stewart plays it, the moments where he gets aggravated or frustrated are fun to watch just because they're so few and far between.
Yeah.
And sort of being in that setting is kind of fun for him. And there was also, the moment where he has to save his ancestors, or his ancestors. I guess it would be his ancestor. Yeah. Trying to get my timeline straight. His ancestor. He has to make sure she goes on that launch, because that inspires him to do what he does. So, like, those kind of things, I like that kind of shit. So yeah. I was totally invested in that. and I was on board for that. And I actually liked some of the newer characters. Obviously, when they brought uh, 7 of 9 in, that's great because she's a great character. But I liked the characters of, especially the rugged, the captain of that ragtag ship, the
Oh,
Santiago.
Rios.
Yeah, Rios. There it is. Yeah, I thought he was kind of. I think it was clearly like a Han Solo type of character, right?
Yeah.
Archetype kind of deal. But I liked him as that character, and it's just kind of funny because he was going to be, throwing it back to DC. He was going to be Aquaman in Justice League Mortal, so that's kind of
Oh,
funny.
okay. I didn't know that.
Um, and the whole time I was watching, I'm like, really? I don't know. I'm trying to picture him as Aquaman, and I'm like, I can't do. Like I could, I guess, because of the whole Jason Momoa thing now.
Yeah.
It's hard to like. Could I have seen this guy as Aquaman? But I was actively doing that while I was watching the show. But no, I like the fact that each of those first two seasons is very different, very unique to uh, to its previous season. So it was good in that way. But like you had said, it was almost like, let's give them something so far removed from what they're used to from Picard's Trek in the first season. Let's slowly start to take it back there in the second season, and then let's go full blown back into it in the third season. I think there was a nice progression between the seasons. What do
Mhm.
you think?
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, out of the 3 seasons, the only part that I'm a bit conflicted on is that the Borg was ever present in all 3 seasons,
Yeah,
and I really loved what they did with the Borg in season 1.
yeah,
In that they were trying to establish and reclaim themselves and find a new reality for what they're all about.
yeah,
Having broken off from the influence of the malevolent Borg Queen. So I really dug that. And then that we moved completely back to kind of how they played the Borg in Next Gen.
yeah,
Um, I was a bit conflicted on because it's not that they didn't do the throwback version well,
yeah.
but I really liked that they had progressed those characters and that
Mm.
um, John Luke was almost in the wrong with
Yeah,
having strong feelings against them, whereas it's just a, a civilization trying to do the best they can to move forward. So yeah, but that's neither here nor there really. Like I said before, I think that they, whether by design or by fluke, like they ended up with a pretty special little um, trilogy of shows to
now,
send this character off.
who of the first two seasons, who were your favorite characters? Like before they brought in the classic crew in season 3, who was your favorite?
I got a soft spot for Rafi just because she is my
Yeah,
sister.
she's cool.
Like
Yeah.
they look similar, they act similar. So uh, I thought she was cool. The character of Alnor was pretty neat too,
Yeah,
with kind
yeah.
of the
And their
ninja
relationship, right?
Romulan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And their relationship between Rafi and him
yeah.
was interesting to watch play out. Yeah,
Well, they did a good job with insinuating all this history and then having it lead uh, to giving the rest of the series some weight as those
yeah.
characters kind of come to be in harm's way and things of that nature. So, and why they would put themselves on the line for this guy. So, yeah, no, I think overall, like it was a great series, and I think
Yeah,
they capped it in a perfect place and in a perfect way. But
yeah.
yeah.
I think once we get to the, oh, by the way, a quick shout out before we go into it. I gotta call out, a special mention to the way they handled in season 2 the backstory with Picard and his mother. Uh,
Yeah.
I really was captivated by that, just because we're getting deeper into this character that we've already spent 30 years with. So we've seen him go through things, right? We've gone on a journey with him.
Mm-hmm.
But to think that there was still this untapped side that we had never experienced, and they did a very effective job at interspersing those flashbacks and then showing, Picard's, you could see his emotion every time he would think back or recall a memory, and like as he was trying to reclaim those memories, right? And so it just like the emotion of it all. I think he played it exceptionally well, and it was edited the way it was, composited and brought to life. It was very effectively done. So I gotta call that out.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and it was a uh, nice change from how we typically see John Luke as being inflappable and
there's a lot of vulnerability there.
Yeah, irreproachable, and that he's always just kind of the pillar on which the rest of the crew kind of uses as their foundation, right, for the things that they're going through. But for him to be the guy going through stuff, because you never really see that outside of the fallout from Locutus with the old series and whatnot. So I thought it was great that they really made him vulnerable for the first time, and were able to convey that into a compelling story.
So, and then we come to the third season, and they get you right off the bat. They were succeeding right from moment one, from the opening and the theme and the like the closing theme. Like you have that opening, title card where you hear a hint of it, right? Like right at the end of the opening title card, and then the end theme, like at the end of the episode, the way it gradually builds to the classic Next Generation theme. I'm like, okay, I mean, after the first episode, I didn't know it was to come 9 episodes later, but I'm like, whatever they do now, just play this theme, and you won me over. Like I'm a sucker for the thing, and it's one of those themes that like there are probably 4 themes or 5 themes that you could play that and instantly get me into the mood for whatever the hell that theme is, like or or you can get me into that headspace. Like there's the Superman the movie theme, Batman '89. This Star Trek theme, Indiana Jones, and there's probably one more that I'm missing off the top of my head. But
the Avengers theme, probably.
I don't even know if that one is good enough to like.
No, it doesn't crack the.
I mean, Marvel doesn't have like this. It's like the MCU. Let me specify. Doesn't really have that theme that I could sit back and think, oh, I'm home. Like I'm home. Like when I hear Superman '78, I sit back and I'm like, oh, there it is. Like, give me more, or Batman '89. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair.
And the Star Trek, the Next Gen theme does that too. Whereas, like the MCU, like I can't listen to an MCU soundtrack, like of the score because it's some of the most generic shit you'll ever hear, right? So it's like, but this, it's like, oh, like this is when I heard that theme, I was like, whatever you guys do now, like you've already got a 5 out of 10. Like your score is already at a 5 just for the theme. So they got me with the theme right away, and what I think it does throughout the whole course of the whole season is that at one point or another, all of the core Next Generation characters are in peril, and there's a genuine, because knowing this is the last season of them having said that out of the gate, when you put those characters in peril, there is a genuine feeling of, are they going to potentially kill one of these classic characters off?
When we had that with Star Wars, right, where it's like they put the pieces on the board and then you didn't know.
But when they tell you it's like this is the last season, right? It's like, okay, so this, like, they could literally, anybody could be killed off here, and so there was that. Whenever somebody was in danger, there was that. Okay, is this going to be the end of this character? It's not like watching, Batman Begins. Batman's not going to die, right? It's like it's Batman Begins. There's going to be a part 2. Like, who are we kidding? I mean, you felt that a little bit in The Dark Knight Rises, but like with that it's different because it's like they could put it all on in the trailer all they want that this is the final Batman story. Everybody and their mother knew we were going to get more Batman. It just wasn't going to be that version, but there was more Batman to come, right?
Yeah, this one you definitely felt the peril and that there was a threat that
Yeah,
we might not see these characters again. And with that whole retirement thing
yeah,
being something that audiences seen be the catalyst for things not continuing, right?
yeah,
Where,
yeah,
in Marvel you had Robert Downey Jr.
yeah.
stepping aside, and then, they put Captain America on the bench at the same time. And then you had Star Wars ended up killing off two of the three characters because they wanted to, and then one because just the unfortunate real life circumstances dictated that they had to do that. So when you get to Picard finally, it's like, shoot, we are in something where this is going to probably be the last time we see these
Yeah.
characters. They're all of an age, so
Yeah, like the fact that they're
maybe.
all really, I don't want to sound rude, but that they're all legitimately up there in age.
Mhm.
How many more, even if they hadn't have told us this was the last season, how many more times can they realistically do this, right?
Yeah.
With this core cast. So there is a sense of finality there. And I'm not sure if Paramount is going to be in any hurry to reboot the character of Picard at some point. I mean, eventually, maybe it will at some point. But
Yeah, I'm almost surprised that, sorry, not to cut you off, when they ran into all the contract issues with that Chris Pine crew,
yeah,
because it sounds like just the cost of the cast is the thing that
yeah,
really dragged a fourth Star Trek movie in the JJ verse down, that they didn't just pivot and start moving towards
that's when
having
I
a
thought they
next
would.
gen
That's
crew.
when I thought they would. But it's like
Yeah.
I can't and maybe for a future movie they might. But as long as it's the bulk of it's on Paramount Plus, I don't see them rebooting or touching the Picard character.
Yeah, no, I agree
It would
that
have to
it'll
be a
be
movie reboot if they do it,
it'll be yeah,
or
well,
20 years from now. It would have to.
yeah, I think that they'll take a swing at doing it with in the exact same way that they did the Abrams one.
Yeah, yeah, but not. Like I said, I don't see any. I don't think it'll happen with any expediency. I think it'll be a while before they touch Picard. Uh,
Yeah, well, we'll see how that Giorgio movie goes, right? And if that one's a Paramount Plus movie or if it's a
yeah,
theatrical movie, and
I think it'll be. I think it's Paramount Plus. I think.
yeah,
And before we continue on talking about season three, just it's my like I like the movies. Obviously, like the newer movies and even the older ones that I've watched. But um, I and this may get me lynched by some fans. I believe that Trek is better served as a television product. Uh, the nature of those stories uh, just is better served and suited on television.
yeah, I agree to a point. I think that you can get kind of those most exciting pieces of Trek. I certainly agree that you don't get the nuance and the soul of Star Trek. Um,
In a 2 hour
with
movie, but
yeah,
wham bang and you're done, right? And so it's what I mean.
yeah, but
And
you do get something big, flashy that people can latch on to and
you
get
you do,
excited
yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the catch-22 because when you bring something to a movie screen, there's the there's the expectation of all right, we're spending X amount of dollars, it needs to make
Hmm.
X amount of dollars back, and I'm sure Paramount when they bring it to the movies is thinking we got to compete with Star Wars and Marvel, and when they do it right, DC. Uh, I don't know that Star Trek can ever reach those box office heights. So it's
Yeah, I don't
you
know,
know
man. Those JJ movies, like especially that first one, like
That first one, yes, yeah.
they did gangbuster business, and
Yeah.
the third one, I don't know what happened with. Well, that one did well too, didn't it?
It did reasonably well. It wasn't as big a hit as the studio wanted, which is why you're seeing this resurgence on Paramount Plus. Like, and the reason they're having issues with the cast for that potential fourth one is that they want to scale back the cost, so that they want to basically hire them, but not that they were hired for the first three. So right there, you're seeing the effect of they've done okay, but they haven't made what we expected.
Yeah.
So
no, that's fair.
We want to do it, but we want to not pay you as much as we were. So it's like, you know what I mean? So it's like, that's why I think they've been killing it on Paramount Plus. I don't see a rush to, hey, let's get back to the movie theater.
Yeah, no, I agree. I
So
agree. Yeah.
That's why I say I think Star Trek as a brand, for at least for a little while longer, is probably better served sticking to Paramount Plus for a while. So back to season 3 though. So I like that everybody at one stage or another in this show was in peril in this season. I also thought that the way they brought each core cast member back in was very organic and in servitude to the story. Like, we see Dr. Crusher right off the bat, and she's sending a distress signal that, only that she feels comfortable with only Picard being the one giving the call, right? Because she, in that message, she reiterates that Starfleet's been compromised, blah, 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 don't trust nobody. So I like the way they brought her in. I thought that was clever. And then, he goes to Riker, who was always his second in command, and brings him. He trusts him. He needs his kind of, he feels that he needs him to complete the mission to save Dr. Crusher. So there's that. So each of the ways they bring in the original cast members, I thought really was smart and organic. Like we see 7 of 9 again because she's the number one on the Titan, right? So
Well, and she wasn't even part of that cast, right? Because she was
Voyager. But the way they brought her back was like, okay, we need her. Like, I have an in on this ship. We need her for this. And then Worf was the interesting one because he was like the informant is not the right word. The
secret agent.
For Raffi to kind of interact with, right? Who was undercover. But I gotta say, to me, Worf was like the character that I was like all in on, just because when you first see him again, he's so different than what we'd gotten used to all those years ago. Like this pacifist, like he's all zen and meditating, and it's like, what is going on here? Like I was so wrapped in on it because I've never seen him like this, and the fact that you're seeing him like Michael Dorn with the gray hair, the gray beard, it's such a striking dynamic. And I'll be honest, back in the day, back when I was a kid, you know how we have Wonderland up here, right?
Yeah.
Well, it used to be Paramount Canada's Wonderland. And it used to have some Paramount characters running around. So it used to have one of the rides was Top Gun. It was a Top Gun ride. And the other thing they had was a Star Trek, like they had Star Trek characters roaming around the park, right? And they had this guy in full on, like every time you'd go, warp like, with the forehead there. And this was back before I started watching. That guy, every time I saw him, scared the shit out of me as a kid. It's like, what the? It's all, but so when I saw Worf, like now with the old, like he's got gray hair, the gray beard, and he's so peaceful. Just it threw me off, but it was so like engaging. It was like, I can't believe I'm seeing this from him.
Yeah, no, they did a good job. Like you said, it was like nice and organic how they brought everybody in. It made sense. There was a few kind of MacGuffin-y type introductions.
Data was the MacGuffin, but right. But it's okay. It's like
and like Geordi, it's like
well,
you knew exactly where the show was going to end up once he's like the curator of the fleet museum. It's like, oh, I know what this is going to lead to. So, but it was cool. And like Deanna being taken hostage, it made sense in the totality of the story, and with the conflict with the changelings, it seemed to be a very logical move that group would take. So yeah, I loved the way they integrated those characters into this story.
And I don't know about you, but I think it was pretty obvious right off the bat that, like, before they even hinted at the idea, that it's Jack was the character, right? It was Picard's son. Like I like the minute you see him, you kind of start getting the inkling before it's brought up that, okay, who is this? There's no question. It's like, yeah, this is Picard's kid.
One, it was nice that they didn't let it linger for very long. They got to establishing that it was his kid pretty darn quick.
Yeah, but even like I don't know. For me, the first time I saw him, and just like his demeanor, his attitude, I'm like, yeah, that's got to be Picard's kid, because otherwise, why introduce this random son of Dr. Crusher? You know, it's like it doesn't make sense. Just to be the son of one of his former colleagues and buddies, like, who cares? Like, it's like nobody would care about that. So you do it right away, but it was okay. But I think watching their sort of Picard and his son's relationship sort of evolve throughout the course of the episodes, what was the exciting part about it? Not the revelation of, oh my God, it's his son. So that's why I think they didn't draw it up, because they wanted to play up on the evolution of that relationship, right?
Yeah, well, and they did a good job of it, like juxtaposing it with what Riker's experience was with losing his son, and him being somebody to impart the importance of having a relationship with Jack onto Picard, and even just Jean-Luc taking stock of where he was in life, and he's kind of like, well, yeah, I got a good thing with this vineyard going, but there is an emptiness to it, right? So it was great that they.
If I'm that age, I want to stay on the vineyard too. Like, screw this shit. I'm too old for this shit. You know, it's garbage. But I'd stay on the vineyard too. But no, it's I think. And the other thing is the fact that because he's Picard's son, and because Picard had that history with the Borg and the Locutus of it all, how Jack would be partially entrenched in that makes a semblance of sense, so that it serves the story, and it didn't feel. I don't think that felt forced. That it was more of a surprise to me, because I wasn't expecting that aspect from the Borg, like that it would be so intertwined with Jack. But I thought it worked.
Yeah, no, I thought it was cool that it was an evolution of the concept of the Borg, with them becoming kind of techno-organic, and it reminded me a bit of the Phalanx in the X-Men comics. But
yeah,
they it was neat. Like I said, I will always lament that they walked a little bit on how they handled the Borg in season 1, but at the same time, if you're gonna do a finale film for the Next Generation cast,
you have
their big bad has to be the Borg, because it's like doing a final Batman film and it not being the Joker that he faces off against. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You mean like doing the Dark Knight Returns, but not doing it and not having the Joker at all? Like somebody did it back in 2006. Anyway, I'm not gonna go there. But I digress. But no, so I like that, having Jack be sort of infused or infected by the Borg is important, because again, you're seeing Picard taking the blame. Like, the only reason he's going through this is because of me, and it's what you talked about earlier, in that the Picard that we've been used to for the past 30 years is this unflappable leader who never is phased, who always seems to have the right answer. And here he doesn't. Like, he's putting the blame on himself. He's having to take advice from Riker on how to broach a relationship with his son. So it's putting Picard in a totally unexpected headspace and scenario, and while also giving you the classics, the greatest hits. So it is season 3 is what you want in a nostalgia, a serving of nostalgia, but it also goes out of its way to give you new scenarios, new situations. So it doesn't just feel like let's go through the motions.
Yeah, I agree.
Just play the nostalgia song, right? So that's why it works. I think you mentioned Geordi, and how that was a bit of a MacGuffin the way they brought him in, but I did like the fact that one of the actresses that played his 2 daughters is actually his real life daughter. Like to get that scenario where she gets to go and act opposite her father in his most well-known role. That's a nice touch. That's a cool.
Well, yeah, and they did some awesome stuff with the fact that Geordi had daughters and that he was drawn into this whole thing from his role as like the museum curator because of his daughters, and then fighting for his daughters. I thought that was great, and it added to the whole family and legacy and children bit as well. And it also made Geordi a bit more of a vulnerable and a character that you didn't know exactly what he was going to do, because years gone by, Geordi would have always just kind of backed the play that was best for Data. But in this case, it's like, there's a few episodes where you thought he might nuke Data because Data was a threat to the well-being of his kids and stuff. So that was something, like the motivations of the different members of the crew, I thought was something that they did spectacularly well, because they balanced them all working together, but also having their individual reasons and motivations for needing to do certain things. So,
exactly. It wasn't just falling into lockstep and hey, we're back in the old routine and let's just go with it because we're putting on a nostalgia show, right?
Yeah, they didn't. The Remember Berries.
I'm back. Yeah, I'm back here because I need to be for this reason or that reason. Like Geordi was very hesitant. Like there was one point where he wasn't going to help him because he's like, I don't want to put my daughters in this situation, so I'm just going to respectfully say, I'd love to help you, but I can't, right?
Yeah, and I thought that we might not get him as part of the crew.
And the cool thing was, though, having him be the museum curator is a way to get some of the classic ships from other shows. Hey, look at this. Like, that's where they leaned into, like, let's do nostalgia for doing nostalgia. But if it's that quick of a scenario where, look, you're going to see the old ship or old ships from past shows, you don't mind that because it's not the crux of the whole show.
No, they didn't sacrifice anything to give you those pieces. In fact, they didn't sacrifice anything to put you on the old Enterprise by the end of the series, right?
Whereas they had to, because it's not as technologically dependent. Therefore, the Borg couldn't corrupt it, right?
Yeah, which was great that they built it into the story, right? Like you look at so many of these projects that fail, and like just kind of why the MCU is collapsing under its own weight right now. It's like you're writing your story to serve concepts and moments, to play on nostalgia or riff on things that the audience liked the first time around. Whereas with this, those pieces of nostalgia come in service of the story that you're telling. And the story is not serving them.
So good on Patrick Stewart for kind of resisting for as long as he did, because I think that motivated the crew behind the scenes to come up with an idea that would warrant him saying, "Okay, this makes sense."
Yeah,
I'll allow it, right? I'll do it.
Yeah, I agree. And so I apologize for the phone ringing there. The election calls are coming in.
Is it your phone or my phone? It could be mine.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Either way, but so I also like the way they handled Data and the fact that it was this newer, unfinished version that encompassed all the personalities
Hmm.
that we've seen throughout the years, and that they were uh, at war with each other in a sense internally, right? And
Yeah, and that they gave him, like, they also gave Data a final conclusion to all those storylines and concepts that they'd um, introduced throughout the course of the series, and that
what it's like to feel human, like different emotions, different feelings. Like he got that because he was an amalgam of all these different versions of himself.
yeah, and that they gave him that by letting him defeat Lore by just being kind of good, and that Lore was kind of the path that he had to uh, walk in order to be able to accomplish the humanity, right? Because Data, always being good and simple,
Yeah,
couldn't get to the complexity that makes humans humans. So
and it's funny the way he defeated Lore by sort of like making him feel the emotion, the things that Data was attached to, like the
Mhm.
cat, the this, and so he kind of made Lore morph into, he sort of absorbed Lore through his own memories and through his own hits. It was cool. Instead of having them, I thought they were going to do like this whole Superman 3 kind of riff where there's that internal struggle, but you're seeing it play out physically. I thought
Oh,
they were
okay.
going to. I thought they were going to do that, like in that space, but they didn't, and I was like, so I was ready for it. But then when they didn't do that, I'm like, oh, that's very clever. Like I wasn't expecting it, and you,
Yeah, like I thought that they would kind of have the defeat come by way of uh, Data winning the day by the kind of the power of love, and
yeah, yeah,
with the strength of his family in the form of the Enterprise crew, but that it kind of went the opposite way, in that Data let Lore win, quote
mm,
unquote, by submitting to him,
yeah,
and instead of Data absorbing Lore, Lore absorbed Data,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it basically um changed Lore into being like the perfected version of Data. So
yeah, yeah. It was quite clever the way they handled it.
mhm.
What's interesting is that the Borg, for a good portion of the last couple episodes, actually wins out. Like they have control of the fleet, right?
Mhm.
And that was another thing that was intriguing because you don't often see the bad guy, the evil force, winning for that length of time. Like I thought our heroes were like, it was a legitimate struggle. Like it was an earned victory for how long they were. It looked like they were going to come up short and lose, right?
Yeah, and you didn't know what was going to happen. Like, there was a sense that you knew that there was going to be a conclusion, but perhaps that conclusion wouldn't be one
It
um
wouldn't be a happy one. Yeah,
that, yeah, was universal, like a universal victory, like where maybe they end the show and there's only one ship left, and that crew is the crew that has to reestablish
the
the
Federation and all that.
Federation,
Yeah,
which they kind of riffed on, I guess, in Discovery season 3
yeah,
or season 2 maybe. But yeah, no, that, like you said, it very much felt earned. And yeah, we might as well get into the end of this whole thing. Like,
yeah,
I love that they had the discipline to wait as long as they did to put all of that cast on the crew of the Enterprise, and that they did small things, that, like, the crew of the Enterprise was just the crew of the Enterprise. They didn't have any of the new characters with them.
yeah,
They
yeah,
didn't rescue anybody. It was just that core group, that they had a satisfying conclusion that served the entire story, with John Luke and Jack being the ones through their newly established father-son bond.
that
Um,
ultimately saved it. Yeah,
yeah, saving everybody. That we had the Riker and Worf. I don't remember
Oh,
them having a bit of a rivalry.
Their
but
banter was hilarious.
yeah, but it was great the way they played that up and just kind of Riker
What?
being a bit jealous almost of the vibe that
He's like, "Who
Deanna
are
and
you?" He's like, "Who?" When he first encounters Worf and he's all peaceful, he's like, "What is going on here? Who are you?" Like, what?
well, and then when he starts getting a bit jealous when he thinks that
Yeah.
Worf is gonna make the move on Deanna there,
But
so
it's funny
that
because
was great.
she hugs him, right? She hugs Worf, and Worf is like, personal space, and he says this whole diatribe of personal space, and I'm dying laughing because Worf, like you're expecting him to cut off somebody's head with the his staff or a sword or whatever, and it's like, but here he is, he's talking about personal space. It was such a dichotomy of like what the character was to what he is now. But it was cool. It was done well. And then when he fell asleep on the shit, like when they're all sitting, they're all sitting in their familiar spots, and he's there sleeping, like and you hear him snoring. That was
Yeah.
hilarious. But yeah, it just again, just them being back on that ship for the first time, it hit all the right notes, without, but it didn't feel like it was a pandering exercise. Like it felt earned, and that's the thing that I think makes this season and this show a success is that the moments of nostalgia, the way they were handled, felt earned.
Yeah, and that you got like such a wonderful send off for that cast. Like I don't feel that I ever need to see them jump into action again. But I
Yeah,
love that the final moment that we spend with them is them playing cards and having a
playing cards.
laugh and
Yeah.
you
It's a
know,
full circle moment to
yeah, just kind
next gen.
of having this earned and enjoyed retirement type of thing and I think we got the setup for our next show with
Yeah, and I did
the
like.
new
Yeah, before you talk about that, we'll end on that. But I did like. I got to call out the relationship between Seven of Nine and the other captain. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
the one that dies, the Todd Stashwick that he played. I can't remember the guy's name. The captain's name now. Jeez, but he was so against, like he was so rude
Mhm.
and sort of dismissive of Seven of Nine, like he wouldn't call her by that name, right? And then by the end of it, he's like, you know, you earned, you are a part of Starfleet, you are a part of this crew, and you're now the captain.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you've earned the right and the privilege of being a captain. And
Yeah,
so
with her performance assessment there.
yeah, so I like the evolution of that dynamic quite a bit.
Mhm.
But now to speak of the ending, so the ending does seem to set up uh, the next show.
Yeah.
We have Seven of Nine as the captain. Uh, we have um, Jack on board as a what
He,
is she, what job did she give him? Was he in
I can't remember. Like he'd technically be an ensign, but
is he a
she
lower
had
deck? Yeah, he's an ensign or lower deck.
yeah, he was technically an ensign, but it seemed like I can't remember, but he got like a bit of a field promotion
Yeah,
from
pretty
her
quick.
right
Yeah,
away. Yeah.
pretty quickly, just because nepotism. And
Yeah.
they even make a joke about that.
Yeah.
Um, and then we have Rafi as part of the crew as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then we have a moment where Jack is in his quarters and is visited by Q,
Yeah.
and and the whole scenario is that Picard's adventure is ending, but yours is just beginning, and
Mhm.
so there's a lot of fan engagement and hype and hoopla for a potential Star Trek legacy. I almost said Superman legacy because
Mm.
that's on my mind, but Star Trek legacy, uh, which would have those core characters back, and I'd like to see it. I think the setup was there. Obviously, they did that as some sort of setup. Otherwise, you didn't have to do it. And I think it makes a lot of sense because you still have the Seven of Nine character that would serve as the sort of bridge between classic and new, right? Because she's been on past shows before, and then I think it'd be a smart way to go personally, and I'd like to see that as the next show.
Yeah, well, with Discovery ending, and then you'll have kind of Strange New Worlds as your
Flagship, I guess.
and your Enterprise crew that's set a little further in the past.
Yeah.
And then this will be your future facing show, but it won't be as far flung into the future as Discovery was, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's in a pretty perfect position. They've got a interesting crew that they've already put the work into establishing, and that I think people like.
Based on the streaming numbers, it looks like people took very well to Picard season 3. So yeah, I can't see Paramount Plus not moving forward with this.
No, well, and especially when you're in a position where you've already been paying for Discovery, right?
I just think it's a scenario of they're waiting for the right time to make the announcement. Like, what doesn't are they really going to announce it off the heels of Star Trek Starfleet Academy? You know, like, are they really going to they just announced that, so they're going to let that announcement sit for a bit, and then what you're suggesting is I think is going to happen is once the Discovery finale airs, they'll formally announce.
Yeah, and is like an Academy has started filming and stuff, hasn't it?
That I'm not sure of. I don't know. I don't know how far along they are.
Yeah, they might announce something after Strange New Worlds is done. So we'll see.
Yeah, but I think it's just a matter of time for that show. Personally, I think it would be extremely shocking if that show didn't happen.
Yeah, I think so. And
so
with them ending shows kind of actively, right? Like Picard is done.
Yeah.
Discovery is done.
Done. Yeah. So you're just basically gonna have, if that's that's how you leave it, you'd have Strange New Worlds continuing, you'd have the 2 animated series, and then Starfleet Academy. So you'd probably want one more live action in there, because how much longer is Lower Decks going to go as an animated series, right? So you'd probably want something else.
Yeah.
To take the place, but we'll see. But I would venture that it's just a matter of time before that gets announced. But let's end our first show by rating, giving a letter grade to season 3, and in general overall of Picard.
So I think as a whole, like it certainly didn't leave me wanting for anything. Yeah. And I'd probably give season 3 of Picard like a straight up A.
Yeah.
And I think like overall, like over the 3 seasons, like it was always enjoyable, it was always interesting, and it was always fresh. So yeah, I don't know that I could give it anything other than an A. It didn't give you exactly what you wanted, but at the same time, when it did kind of play those nostalgia notes, it did it perfectly.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and also echo and give it an A as well. I just think it was. I didn't know really what to expect, how far deep into seeing this crew we were going to get. But they gave me things I expected, as well as things that I didn't expect. And it was a perfect, I think it wound up being as perfect as you could possibly get without writing fan fiction in your head.
Yeah.
Of a finale for these characters, that if I never see them suit up again, I'll be perfectly happy with that because of what we got.
I agree.
So with that, I'm going to give it an A. And I think this show should be a template on how you handle, in terms of storytelling, the use of nostalgia. This is what other things should look at as a template for how to write good nostalgia acts.
Well, and they were restrained in what they did, and they kept it a little more subtle, right? Like, I look at those trailers for the new Indiana Jones movie, and I'm just like, my goodness, this feels like a bridge too far just from the trailers, right?
They're really, they're hitting on, look, this is our greatest hit. That's all we got.
Yeah.
And it clearly by the early, again, I hate using Rotten Tomatoes as a barometer, but according to the early reactions, it's looking kind of scary. But
Yeah,
hey, that
they made a
opens
big
up the door
play.
for the Flash to be a big hit. Like if something else this summer falters, it opens up. Not that I'm hoping for anything to falter, because I'd like everything to do well. But if something falters, it just means more potential success for the Flash. So hey, them the breaks. If that happens. I like Indiana Jones. Like I love the first couple, but it's not like if that has to hit $1 billion for me to be content. Like if it does whatever it's going to do, and that's fine. Uh, but for this, I think they did everything that I wanted, and things that I didn't know I wanted. So I'm glad that we got it. I'm glad Patrick Stewart was around and able to revisit this. And as of right now, he's gotten a better send off as Picard than he did as Professor X. I'm hoping Deadpool 3 will rectify that.
Yeah.
Because what Multiverse of Madness did to him, I was not pleased. So good on Star Trek for giving at least one of his characters a proper farewell. And with that, we're going to end our show. We hope you enjoyed the first episode of this relaunched Star Trek show on the network. And Carlos and I will be back for many more discussions, one of which will be, of course, Strange New Worlds, because we'll be sort of more on the ground floor for that one. Maybe we'll do, around the first half of the season, we'll come back and discuss the first 5 of season 1. Will be maybe our next episode. We'll figure out how we're going to play it, but we'll be back to talk Strange New Worlds. We'll also, maybe we'll revisit the JJ movies at some point, and we'll do some diving into the since we like comics. We'll do some diving into the Star Trek comics and have some fun with those, because there's some good stuff happening in that realm.
Yeah,
so,
I heard year 5 is amazing. So
maybe that'll be the first one we'll start with. Maybe we'll discuss that off air. But we'll be back, Carlos and I. So stay tuned and join us when we do return. But in the meantime, before our next episode, if you want to track Carlos and I down on social media and discuss Star Trek, DC, or Marvel, or whatever you want to discuss, you can. Where can they find you, Carlos?
Canadian Cape Crusader is my handle. So CDN Cape Crusader R is what it is. That's been my tag since the days of the DC Comics MySpace messaging boards back in university.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, that's where you can find me.
And you can find me on Twitter at Adam_LeafsFan. I should say disgruntled in there, but it won't fit on Twitter. So it is where it is. Find me there. The podcast network has its own Twitter handle at MMMPDC. We have a Facebook group, which the link will be listed in the description below. Click that. I will add you. We can continue the conversation there. But until next time, remember that Star Trek Picard is forever. From the first time he captained the starship to the last. So long, everybody.